On a Sunday afternoon, early summer sunlight poured down on the quiet residential streets of suburban Boston. A family meeting was about to begin at the historic Williams mansion in Brookline. The green ivy climbing up the red brick exterior told the story of this home's long history. In a corner of the garden, Linda Williams silently tended to the hydrangeas. At 34, she worked as a nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Even out of her whites and dressed in casual weekend clothes, she carried herself with the dignified air typical of medical professionals. Her state university background made her stand out in this family. However, the strong sense of purpose she inherited from her father gave her an unwavering inner strength that remained steady despite others' scrutiny. Linda instinctively straightened her back at the sound of the front door opening. "Linda, we're about to start," called her mother-in-law Elizabeth. Born into a prominent Boston family and educated at Wellesley College, Elizabeth had built a career teaching at a prestigious private high school. Even now, dressed in a gray suit, she maintained the authority of her teaching days. Her gaze always held a sharp, appraising quality. "Yes, I'm coming," Linda replied while removing her gardening gloves. On the terrace, her husband James was reading the Wall Street Journal. Though successful as an investment banker, shadows of worry flickered across his face. 3 years of marriage and the strain of being caught between his wife and family had begun etching fine lines into his handsome features. "Brother, I heard from Ashley," announced his sister as she appeared on the terrace, carrying herself with the same refinement as their mother. Ashley worked at a major advertising agency and was a Harvard Business School graduate. She was also one of the strongest opponents of her brother's marriage. She held her smartphone in one hand, not sparing Linda a glance. "I just finalized the wedding details with Michael. Of course, I've consulted with his mother too. Everything's been decided for the Four Seasons Hotel ballroom decorations." Ashley's fiancé, Michael Foster, was a nephrologist. A Harvard Medical School graduate, he was a brilliant doctor already promised the position of department head at a young age. He was Linda's colleague and well trusted at the hospital for his gentle nature. "Oh, how is Margaret? How's she feeling?" Linda asked about Michael's mother, and the atmosphere suddenly froze. Margaret Foster was battling progressive kidney disease. A former elementary school teacher, she was beloved by medical staff for her kind personality. However, lately there had been whispers around the hospital that her condition was deteriorating. Speaking of which, Linda, Elizabeth cast a meaningful look. "I hear you've been working quite a lot of overtime at the hospital lately. More night shifts too, I'm told." Ashley gave a small laugh at those words. "Being a nurse must be so demanding. I can't even imagine." James briefly looked up from his newspaper at the sarcastic comment, but quickly returned to his previous position. Linda simply smiled silently. The early summer breeze drifting through the garden gently stroked her hair. It was her only comfort. The Williams family's Sunday brunch began as usual. The aroma of clam chowder from Legal Seafoods wafted through the antique-styled dining room. The family silver, passed down through generations, was arranged neatly on the table. "A nurse is just a doctor's assistant, after all," Elizabeth declared matter-of-factly while slowly lifting her spoon to her mouth. "To think that someone from a state school, just a nurse, would join our family." Her voice dripped with years of contempt. Ashley chimed in, "I've removed her photos from our social media family albums." It wouldn't do to have our acquaintances see them. She proudly showed her mother her phone screen, adding, "I've edited all the party photos too." Linda continued eating in silence. The warm soup was gradually cooling. Her reflection in the silver spoon appeared distorted. "James, dear," Elizabeth turned to her son. "Have you considered starting a new life? There are several lovely female doctors at Michael's hospital. Dr. Jennifer, for instance, Harvard graduate, and her father's a senator." James only managed a vague smile. His fingers unconsciously crumpled his napkin. After the meal, Linda tried to help with cleanup but was stopped by the maid. "The madam said not to accept your help." A week later, Linda had an unexpected encounter in the halls of Massachusetts General Hospital. Destiny began to shift dramatically in those white corridors filled with the scent of disinfectant. Linda quickly caught a woman who was stumbling while pushing an four stand. It was Michael's mother, Margaret Foster. Her complexion was poor, with cold sweat on her forehead. "I'm fine. Just a bit tired," she said. However, Linda's experienced eyes could see the severity of her symptoms. She had the same look as Linda's father when he was suffering from similar symptoms. The blood pressure reading showed dangerous levels. Checking the medical records, Linda saw that Margaret's kidney function was rapidly declining. Her creatinine levels were 5 times the normal range. She needed experimental drug treatment, but it wasn't covered by insurance. Linda caught her breath at the amount, $350,000. It far exceeded an average family's annual income. You can't put a price on human life. Her father's words suddenly came back to her. He had been a paramedic who died living by that belief, sacrificing his own life to save a patient during a rescue operation in an impoverished area. Now, Linda faced a similar choice. Linda made her decision. She took leave and began providing 24-hour care for Margaret. She drained her savings and put her father's life insurance money toward the treatment costs. She even quietly pawned her father's cherished watch, a family keepsake. Linda honored Margaret's wish, "Please keep this from the family." Those words, "I don't want to worry them," were filled with a mother's deep love. But the price was steep. Balancing night shifts and caregiving pushed Linda to her physical limits. The dark circles under her eyes, barely concealed by makeup, sparked speculation. "Are you hiding something lately?" James asked one night. The table lamp illuminated his confused expression. "Mother says there are some unfavorable rumors about you at the hospital." "Did something happen?" Linda just shook her head. Telling the truth would break her promise to Margaret. "Rumors spread, she's neglecting her work. She's leaking patient information. Even the head nurse warned her." Elizabeth's invitations were deliberately lost. Linda was excluded from family gatherings, and malicious rumors spread on social media. Comments like, "A mere nurse trying to infiltrate high society," cut deep into Linda's heart. Still, Linda continued visiting Margaret's hospital room every day. Changing IVs, checking vitals, and most importantly, providing emotional support to her patient. "Why are you so kind to me?" Margaret asked one day. Her eyes held a strange gleam in the twilit hospital room. Linda answered while adjusting the 4-drip rate, "Because it's what my father taught me." She smiled, keeping her father's photo tucked in her chest pocket. Margaret's condition gradually improved. The new drug began showing effects, and her blood test results approached normal levels. However, Linda's situation grew increasingly difficult. "Remove her from the family photos," Elizabeth's voice carried from across the hall. "I don't want any embarrassment during the wedding preparations. All of Boston's elite will be there." 1 week remained until Ashley's wedding. Early summer rain began falling on Boston. Looking out the hospital window, Linda remembered her father's last words. Smiling in his blood-stained uniform in the ambulance, he had said, "Someone's always watching when you do the right thing." Believing in those words, Linda decided she would visit Margaret's hospital room again tomorrow, even if the whole world stood against her. The ballroom at the Four Seasons Hotel Boston was bathed in early summer sunlight. Light from the chandeliers sparkled on white tablecloths, and the fragrance of fresh flowers wafted elegantly through the air. Each table was adorned with pink and white rose arrangements carefully selected by Ashley, and the place cards were embellished with gold leaf. An hour before the ceremony, Linda entered through the staff entrance at the back. Boston's social elite were arriving one after another at the main entrance, filling the lobby with the scents of Chanel and Dior. "You stand over there," Elizabeth pointed to the furthest corner of the venue. A spot against the wall, out of everyone's sight. Linda, dressed in a black cocktail dress, quietly nodded. "This is our special day," Elizabeth's voice oozed intimidation. "There isn't even a seat for you. That's the treatment you deserve." Ashley approached, gracefully managing the train of her wedding dress. The pure white gown was reportedly custom-made by a Paris haute couture house. "It's more than enough for someone who isn't worthy of being family," her sister-in-law's voice held an icy chill. "I don't want you ruining this day." James sat at the VIP table with his parents and relatives. Even when he spotted his wife, he only looked away. The ceremony began, and Michael took his place at the altar. His profile showed tension unlike his usual expression at the hospital. "What a perfect couple. This marriage will further elevate the Williams family's social standing. Marrying a doctor, how enviable." Whispers spread through the venue. A service cart was placed in Linda's corner, making her presence even less noticeable. The ceremony proceeded solemnly, with the exchange of vows. Ring exchange, first kiss. Everything progressed like a perfect production. Then came the highlight of the reception, the groom's speech. Michael stood, champagne glass in hand. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for joining us on this special day," Michael began. However, his voice carried a strong determination unlike anything he showed in his examination room. "On this special day, there's someone I must thank first." Elizabeth smiled with satisfaction. Ashley's face lit up with expectation. "That person." Michael paused and slowly turned his gaze to the corner of the room. "Is the person standing over there?" His hand holding the champagne glass pointed to Linda. The room froze. "That person standing there is the one we should all be grateful to." The color drained from Elizabeth's face. Ashley looked at her mother in confusion. "Ladies and gentlemen, my mother suffers from severe kidney disease," Michael's voice resonated through the silent room. "The person who saved her is Linda, standing right here." All faces at the round tables turned toward Linda. She stood silently behind the service cart, head bowed. Experimental treatment isn't covered by insurance. Linda used her own savings and sold her beloved father's keepsakes to cover the enormous treatment costs. Michael continued, she also provided dedicated 24-hour care every day. At that moment, the doors to the venue opened. Margaret entered in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse. Her cheeks showed a healthy color. Linda. Tears glistened in Margaret's eyes. Thank you. Elizabeth's face turned pale. Ashley's hands trembled as they gripped her bouquet. James slowly stood up. He took a step toward where his wife stood. The venue was wrapped in deep silence. Chandelier light poured down on Linda. The atmosphere in the ballroom transformed instantly. Michael took a deep breath and continued. My mother was suffering from progressive kidney disease. Her condition worsened daily, beyond the reach of conventional treatment. His hand holding the champagne glass showed a slight tremor. Though he had faced life and death countless times as a doctor, this moment was special. She needed experimental drug treatment. However, it wasn't covered by insurance. The cost was staggering, $350,000. A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone gasped at the amount. That's when one nurse stepped forward. Michael's gaze returned to Linda. She gave up all her savings, sold her father's keepsakes, even used life insurance money. His voice caught. She put everything toward my mother's treatment. Elizabeth's hands gripped the tablecloth tightly. Her expression contorted beneath her perfect makeup. Why go so far? Ashley's voice was hoarse. Margaret had her wheelchair moved toward Linda. Linda's father was a paramedic, her voice carried to every corner of the room. I heard he died bravely during a rescue mission. Tears welled in Linda's eyes. The memory of her father's last day came back vividly. Your father used to say, Margaret continued. You can't put a price on human life. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Linda provided 24-hour care for me every day. Margaret's voice was thick with gratitude. She used all her vacation days, sometimes came to my room even after night shifts. Though exhausted, she always smiled while changing my IVs. The color drained from Elizabeth and Ashley's faces. The malicious rumors they had spread were being overturned one by one. When Linda sold her father's watch, she was crying. The head nurse stood to testify. But she said, if it can save Margaret, Dad would be happy. James stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. The truth he had overlooked was now coming to light. My wife. James's voice trembled. She was such an amazing person, and I never noticed. Even his composure, trained through years in investment banking, couldn't hold in this moment. Clear regret showed in James's eyes. Michael continued quietly, the daily care, arranging the treatment costs, and above all, that devoted love. Linda did it all silently, without anyone knowing. All of us medical staff knew. Another nurse stood up. How Linda would visit her mother's room even after night shifts. How she always showed patients a smile while walking the halls, even when exhausted. The atmosphere in the room grew even heavier. But why did you stay silent? Ashley asked with a trembling voice. Linda spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but steady. Because, it was a promise, she smiled. Margaret didn't want to worry her family. And a moment's hesitation. I thought this was natural, both as a nurse and as a human being. A tear rolled down Elizabeth's cheek. The proud mask she had worn for years crumbled audibly. She covered her face with both hands, heedless of her ruined makeup. Elizabeth's voice shook. How terrible. Linda, we completely misunderstood you. Her words carried deep regret for years of prejudice. This moment shook the values she had lived by in Boston's high society. Ashley rushed to Linda, her wedding dress train trailing behind her. Sister, please forgive me. Her voice held no trace of its former arrogance. The guests, dressed in luxury brands, all hung their heads. Sobs could be heard among those who had whispered unkind words about Linda. Margaret stood up from her wheelchair. The crowd stirred. This too is thanks to Linda. Margaret slowly walked toward Linda. The experimental treatment worked, and I can walk again. This life, these steps are all gifts Linda gave me. James also approached his wife. I should have understood you better. His eyes mixed regret with love. The chandelier light gently enveloped Linda. Her profile overlapped with her father's image. Your father would be so proud. Margaret took Linda's hand. You've carried on his will beautifully. A new atmosphere filled the venue. It was a moment when old shells of prejudice and class consciousness were broken, letting truth's light shine through. A white calla lily opened another petal. It was as if announcing a new dawn. And beside that flower, the photo of Linda's father that she had always treasured smiled quietly. 2 years after the wedding, in early summer. A different air now flowed through the Williams family garden. Elizabeth had begun volunteering at a nursing home in Brookline. Her former haughty attitude had faded, and her figure in a white apron carried a certain gentleness. I'm learning so much from the nurses, Elizabeth told a former student she met in the facility's hallway. Compassion, the preciousness of life. I had lost sight of what's truly important for many years. Ashley had changed too. Now directing medical campaigns at her advertising agency, she passionately worked to communicate the social value of nurses. Before, I could only judge people by their titles and education, Ashley said during a planning meeting. But my sister taught me that true value lies in people's hearts. On the last Sunday of each month, the Williams family held family meetings. Elizabeth, James, Linda, Ashley, and Michael gathered around the table. Sometimes Margaret joined them in her wheelchair. Thanks to all of you, my life has found new meaning, Margaret said, holding a warm cup of tea. I want to give something back to society from this experience. Those words proposed the establishment of a medical support fund. A fund for patients needing experimental treatments. Linda's actions had planted seeds of new hope. James decided to use his investment banking experience to help manage the fund. I want to deliver your spirit to more people, he vowed, holding his wife's hand. Linda continued working as a nurse while participating in the fund's activities when time allowed. The whole family now understood the strength hidden behind her eyes. Your father would be proud. At Margaret's words, Linda nodded quietly. Her father's watch had been bought back by an anonymous donor and returned to her. In the garden, hydrangeas bloomed vibrantly. Elizabeth picked up a calla lily. We took quite a roundabout way, didn't we? Tears glistened in her eyes. But thanks to this detour, we learned the true meaning of family. Ashley sighed deeply, remembering how she had pushed Linda away. Sister's strength and kindness changed us. Michael, though busy with his duties as a doctor, devoted himself to helping patients who needed experimental treatments. Hope always shone in his examination room. What Linda taught us, Michael would tell young medical residents, is that medicine isn't just about technique. It takes courage to face people's hearts and lives. The changes in the Williams family had influenced Boston's high society. The value that there are things more important than status and education spread quietly but surely. In the twilight, Linda stood in a corner of the garden, looking at her father's photo. There he smiled gently in his paramedic uniform. "Dad, I understand now," Linda spoke to the photo. "Saving a life means saving a heart too." Warm voices of family could be heard from behind her. Dinner was ready. On the table sat Legal Seafood's clam chowder. What was once a symbol of status had transformed into a symbol of family bonds. Elizabeth spoke softly before everyone. "Our mission now is to share the love and courage Linda taught us with more people." Her voice carried strong determination. "Isn't that right, my beloved daughter?" At those words, a tear rolled down Linda's cheek. It was a tear of joy. Outside the window, hydrangeas swayed gently in the sunset light. Each petal seemed to watch over this family's new story.